My name is Jordyn Kimelhein, and I'm currently in Hyattsville, Maryland, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. So I'm actually
Okay.
moving back to Philadelphia in December. I am a software developer.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you first met Emmett?
Sure. So I met him doing anti-occupation work with If Not Now, specifically in the Philly chapter. We were both pretty involved. So that's how we became friends. It would have been in 2017, late 2017. We met like doing If Not Now stuff, and then we kind of were part of a broader social group of queer Jewish people who were part of that organization. So we didn't have a very intense like one-on-one friendship. We saw each other at parties and meetings and things. Like a particular memory is like we were at someone's party. Like, for some reason, we started singing the song like "Hey Juliet" by like LMNT. I always think of him when I hear that song. That's how we became friends, being in the same spot.
Can you tell me a little bit about the network that kind of formed around Emmett?
Seemed, from my perspective, to be a combo of people he knew through If Not Now, and then people from Reconstructionist Rabbinical College where he was attending. I know there were some people he knew from like disability spaces, and I know he had some people who didn't live in Philadelphia who were sort of involved, at least virtually. I think kind of the core was like a Philadelphia crew of like RRC people and If Not Now people, and then disability space people. A great lesson for me was how much a community can form that isn't necessarily biological family. I've always heard the term like chosen family. That was really that in action. Not that everyone involved was Jewish, but it was like a very Jewish family. And it felt like a very like Jewish space surrounding him and like kind of a Jewish normative space. And in particular, his living funeral before like he went into hospice was very moving, and that was very like Jewishly oriented. He got ordained as a rabbi. It sort of like showed the whole thing, the possibilities of what a Jewish community can be. Like everyone coming together in this way that I don't think most of us were prepared for. Most people involved with this were very young. I know for me, this is my first experience really with death beyond grandparent. The mourning rituals of Judaism, like it was a very Jewish funeral, the actual funeral, as well as the living funeral. And it just felt like that kind of permeated the whole environment. One thing I didn't really expect was like how long of a process it was. Wonderful, we got so much time with him. When I went to his living funeral, I kind of was like, okay, well, that was it. That's our closure. And then actually, he still had a lot of life left in him. You knew how it was going to end, like, because that was the whole point. He was on hospice. So that was very, this sort of gradual goodbye, which on one hand was like a great gift to spend more time with him, but also was really sad to be like, see your friend like sort of dying and in pain. There was nothing really to fix it except you could just, the only thing you really could do was be there. That's definitely something that I'm going to remember. My wife, she had a friend who died very suddenly recently. On one hand, it reminded me a lot of Emmett's death because a dear young friend died, but it was also very different because it was so sudden. It made me feel kind of grateful that I had like that chance be with him in sort of this like journey as opposed to just like a book being shut. It was really hard. He was younger than me, and it just felt so unfair. It's tragedy for anyone to die young, but he was so special and like he had so much to offer, and it just seemed so cruel. It was like his yard site like a year later, and a couple of us wanted to meet in Clark Park in West Philadelphia to have like a little ceremony. And this was right that weekend when COVID really became a thing in like March 2020, like the NBA shut down. Ever to try to figure out like, is it responsible to do this or should we cancel it? And it was like the person I most want to talk to you about this is Met. He would be like the number one person to talk about how do we integrate Jewish ritual and like community with community care and like health and stuff. Like he would have been the person to talk to. Damn, he's not here. It made me sad that like we didn't have his insight into like the world now. When he was dying, part of me is like, oh, he went out with a lot of grace, but it was also, it was so fucking unfair. Like he shouldn't have had to. Like no one should have that responsibility.
Sarah Barish saying at his funeral, like we don't have to pretend that this is fair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it's one of the most just like unfair things I've honestly ever experienced. It's just someone who was a good person who had a lot of like people really loved, and like I wanted him around. He just there's a sort of inescapable force.
Like those contingents of people, how did their skills help shape the space?
One thing is, so a lot of the people involved are organizers, and they are really good at asking for things. A big thing was that like Emmett didn't want to be alone at night. So there would always have to be at least someone to sleep over in his hospice room. People would just like text me randomly and be like, hey, can you like go take a shift? That having people who were comfortable asking for stuff from their community was really useful. There was also a lot of pastoral care and knowledge, especially with the RRC community, which was not something I had. So I was grateful that other people were part of that. And I know that the disabled community that was involved was like really knowledgeable, like the more medical aspects of all this, which I also certainly was not. And I imagine that they were a great support on that front. For me, I felt like my skills I could give were I could show up and be reliable, be a friend. Even though that wasn't specialized, I was really happy that I was able to be there in that capacity. There was a lot of music that like I remember very distinctly Emmett and other folks just sort of like singing. The pastoral care was like helpful both for Emmett, but also like for everyone. It was a scary thing, but it was also never scary to be there. When I would like go into the hospital and then like the hospice facility later, I would like always kind of like be stealing myself. Oh, this is going to be so hard. And then I'd get there and I usually had a pretty good time.
Yeah.
Like
it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. There'd be snacks. Like, we'd all be chatting and like gossiping. It felt warm. Having people who were used to forming community, that was really helpful. Circles of grief and care. Like, clearly Emmet's the center. And there's people who are like very much there, like day to day. And there's some people who are like a little bit more peripheral. And they were there for Emmet, but they were also there to be supportive for the whole community. When he passed, and then on the day of the funeral, I had a little like pre-funeral breakfast. I think I had it at Jordyn Tatel's apartment, but like I brought over the food and like a coffee machine and stuff because I was like, I'm in a state to do this. Not everyone is, and like I want to make sure these people are fed before they like go on this really hard day. And I was really happy that I was able to do that. I definitely did some crafts when I was there. I wish I had I guess I used them to decorate the room, so I didn't take any of them home. It was like a banner that ended up, I feel like I took rallies and stuff like after the fact. I guess we signed it at the living funeral. That was like a big banner. I believe it said like Emmett in Hebrew letters. Is that right? Yeah, like it was sort of decentralized. Like there wasn't one person who was like in charge of what was happening. It was like people would see a need and like put out a call, and then it would get. It's sometimes maybe Emmett would be the one who'd like, hey, I have a need, but other times someone would see it and make the ask. And yeah, I think that made it like a much stronger structure than if like one person was in charge, because I'm sure that person would have gotten incredibly burned out. A lot of the organizers sort of, that was the model they were used to, and they kept it going. And I think it worked really well in this situation. That was really important, that everyone had kind of cut their teeth already and like knew how to show up when something big was happening and people needed to just get it done. If nothing else, I think that Jewish communal youth movements make people who are incredibly good at organizing. He was just so brave and honest. You kind of couldn't help but want to be there. He wasn't ashamed of what was happening. He was like, yeah, I'm dying. Like, these are the things I need. With the living funeral, like that was, I think, a great kickoff to it. And that he was sort of like embracing it. Like, this is the process I'm going through. And like, this is the community I want to be a part of it. Yeah, like it could have been 3 days and it was much more than 3 days. But yeah, we didn't know at the time. You had to live in the moment because like you didn't know how long there would be left. Like, it could be scary to be like, I'm going to go to like someone's hospice and be with a dying person. Doing it for Met and for the community like made me feel braver. You kind of have like a responsibility to the rest of the community to like be there for them. It's not you're going to show up when like it's fun and convenient, when they're having good times, and also when they're having hard times. A lot of my Jewish ethics are predicated on the idea of like loving the stranger as yourself. And obviously Emmett was not a stranger. Loving someone who's going through something different than you, that like maybe you don't fully understand, you should love him the way that you would want to be loved if you were in that boat. There's like a precedent for people having to like take on this responsibility. We can go on a whole thing about the parallels to the AIDS crisis and that everyone sort of rose to the occasion that they were presented with. We did the best we could for him as a community. He was sort of at one of the most vulnerable positions you can be in kind of like taking that leap of faith and be like, everyone's going to be here for you. And they did. He had a lot of trust in us. So there were two different rooms. There was the first one was like in Pennsylvania Hospital. And that was like really more of a traditional hospital room. Like he had a bed in the corner. There were like some benches, like it was like chairs. Like I know I slept on it. It was pretty uncomfortable. Like maybe was it a cot? I don't remember what it was, but there was definitely like an uncomfortable sleeping area for a guest. And there was like a little attached bathroom. Until he decorated it, it was kind of grim because it was just like a hostel room. When he moved to the hospice facility, that was a little warmer. I believe the room had carpet. Like his bed was bigger, I think. It just like was comfier, and like the building it was in, like there was like a separate room with like a kitchen. It's also a bigger room. It just like it felt like a kind of logistically a better place to be for what was happening, which was a lot of people were visiting and being kind of active.
There was a second bed.
Yeah, you're right. There was, as opposed to like, so it was like a lot comfier for you. I don't know if I ever slept over at the second one, but yeah, the first one was not super suited for like an overnight guest. Like you made do. It felt like it was deliberately uncomfortable. Like they didn't want you there. I always find hospitals like a little, like they freak me out a little. I think they do a lot of people. And it's like, oh, going into this like scary medical place in the hospice. Not that it wasn't also a medical facility, because it was devoted just to hospice and not being an entire hospital. It was like a little cozier.
What were the decorations like?
So it was a lot of stuff that people drew, little arts and crafts stuff. It was definitely very colorful, like, a lot of rainbows. It was a very like gay.
A lot of people compared it to a dorm room.
Yeah, it did kind of have that vibe of kind of random, but everything was special. Like, yeah, like when you're decorating your dorm room, it's like you really picked out that poster. You can almost forget that like, it was the room of a dying person. There was so much life in it, even till the very end. Like you were with him, you weren't saying goodbye. It was sort of a liminal space in the sense that you knew he was going, but in that moment, you were just sort of there with him. Because I definitely was never there being like, oh, how many days does he have left? I was never like doing that calculation. Because like A, I couldn't have known, but B, you knew it was happening, but it didn't feel totally like heavy on you. You could be there in the moment with him. I feel like he always wanted to know like the gossip, like what were people up to?
Yeah. Yeah. And he said once that he's like, my mother didn't raise me to be a yenta, but here I am.
No, he was a yenta. And I say that with love, like as someone who's also can be a yenta.
The wedding that he wanted to have.
I psychologically got it. If like the only milestone you have in theory left for you is death, I totally see wanting to celebrate something else in between. I think I get it more now that I am married than like I did at the time. Now I'm like, oh, of course he wanted to do that. He wanted to like extract as much like life as he could. That would have been really important for him. Like, I definitely remember looking at outfits with him. He was considering wearing a dress, so we were like, those, and like that part was fun. It's a very holy space. There's like not that many milestones to reach that level of like this is a big deal. And I guess he knew that the next occasion that would be his funeral. Why not have one in between where you can really enjoy it?
I remember him telling me, like, he's like, I already had a living funeral. He's like, maybe we'll have a bar mitzvah next.
Oh, I wish we had done that for him. That would have been like totally feasible in his hospice room. Yeah, just check all the boxes. Speed run through like the Jewish life cycle. For my birthday party, I did a roast with a bunch of my friends, and they like roasted me. And in a weird sort of way, it reminded me of Emmett's living funeral, in that people were making like speeches about you. And I think more people should have the opportunity to like, have their friends and loved ones like gather around them and just say stuff. It was like kind of a random connection I made, but I was like, oh, this is like a little bit like that. Like this is the type of thing that normally you don't hear people think about you till you're dead, and you don't actually get to hear it because you're dead. But like you actually have that when you're alive. There's the whole Jewish thing where if like one person's death is like the death of a whole world.
What were some of the like other things that you found yourself doing to help out?
I would walk the dog. So like that was a task that I would do. And like I like that for a lot of reasons. Like one, it was genuinely helpful to walk Roxy, but it was also like kind of therapeutic. Like if things got kind of heavy, to just like go out on a walk with a dog is like one of the best things you can do, really. And then I also, yeah, I slept over in the hostel room a couple of times to like, be there. I feel like I brought snacks which wasn't so much for Annette, but was for everyone else. A lot of like kind of just like logistical, like helping hand kind of labor. Mm-hmm.
What was it like for you to sleep over in the first hospice center?
It was really the only time when me and Annette were like alone because there were always so many people there. It was like hard for me. I didn't really know what to say. If there was always like this hustle and bustle when there was a group of people, I kind of was trying to strike the line. I didn't want to be too maudlin because I know he would have hated that if I was like, I'm so sorry you're dying. I didn't want to be too chipper where I was ignoring what was going on. So I don't know if I was the best conversationalist, honestly, but like I tried to be there. And the actual sleeping over itself, people would leave and I would kind of be in like my little bed, fake bed thing, and like me and him would talk. I remember once he was in a lot of pain, a nurse came and like talked to him about it. And I think it was in the morning when I was leaving, so I wasn't really there for like how the whole thing shook out. But I remember kind of being like, oh, this is really real. And I felt really bad, like that he was suffering. And it felt very intimate to witness him in pain like that. I would walk Roxy like the night before going to bed. And then I think I would walk her again in the morning. And then I would pack up and like go to work. And that was like a really jarring transition because just show up in my office, like, everything was normal when I just been in this. And I didn't really talk about it with my coworkers. I didn't know they'd like get it. So I would kind of just be like, hi guys, and like make my coffee. And yeah, I sort of wish I had been a little bit more, not that I didn't tell my like friends and like loved ones and stuff. I think I could have not treated it like something to like a secret because like it wasn't. But I think that there's like some, I guess, residual shame I had around sickness. I didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable by being like, hey, I was just like with my dying friend last night. Like, what's up? Like, let's have sprint planning.
What would Emmett like tell you telling people the truth?
Like literally his name meant truth. Like he would be like, be honest about what's happening and trust that people are going to get it and they will be there for you. Because yeah, I think I did kind of want to be like, oh, I can go do this kind of traumatizing care work and then just like immediately go back to our normal life, pretend like nothing was wrong. That wasn't really, I think, the best way to handle it. And he wouldn't have wanted me to handle it like that. That was not what he was about. That's something I am learning to do in my marriage. Because like I know when I get sick and like not at a met level sick at all, but when I'm like anything's wrong, I have a cold, I kind of go into just leave me alone, let me die mode, like a sick animal. And like I'm just like in my bed, do not talk to me. If I have to throw up, like do not come and check on me, do not hold my hair back. I want to do it all myself. That is not really great. And when I've accepted help when I'm in like those vulnerable situations, it does feel really good getting taken care of. He was sort of able to be brave about being vulnerable in a way that I wish I could be more of. I should remember him next time I'm like trying to be this like totally independent being who doesn't need anything from anyone, because that's not how people work. I think he's really one of the bravest people I've ever known. Brave in that he faced something horrible, and brave that he still believed in other people when you could have just been like, fuck it, and like sunk into yourself and like rolled over and died. And that was not what he did. It always felt good when I was in the moment doing something helpful. So like it was something you really could do. And that's still, I think, govern how I react when like someone's going through a hard time. Is like, even if I don't know what to say, I can always do something, like even just like make them a cup of tea or something. Like the value of that is something I've definitely carried with me. Like sometimes there's not words, sometimes you can't fix it, but you can be there.
What kind of activities happened in hospice?
Some singing and art projects. There was a lot of talking, especially when it was a larger group. There was playing with Roxy. I know, like, I didn't do this a lot with Matt, but I know he watched TV with them. He told me once that he watched with someone this terrible short-lived show called God Friended Me. That was like a sitcom where I think like someone becomes like Facebook friends with God. And it's always stuck with me. I'm like, what the hell was that show? But it seemed to have like entertained him because it was so bad. Yeah, people kind of just like hung out. Like it wasn't super structured, as you'd imagine. Like when you're just like chill, it was really just going to your friend's house and just hanging out.
The space kind of functioned like a Shiva house.
Yeah, and that's one thing I really one of the many things I've taken away from Emet is like how important ritual is involved around grieving in particular. My grandmother passed away like a year ago, and for some reason she didn't want a funeral, so we didn't have one. And she wasn't Jewish, so we didn't have like a shiva or anything, and she was cremated. And it just felt very abrupt. It was like, oh, she died, and it just we're just gonna move on. It was weird. I didn't like it. It was very unsettling. On a complete reverse, like so my wife's great uncle died, and he was a friar actually. So we went to the funeral at like the priory or whatever, and there was all the ritual. Like, I really didn't understand because it was very Catholic, but it was still felt good to just be like doing something and marking that something was happening. And the fact that Emet's death had so much ritual, both like the living funeral and then the kind of extended Shiva house of his hospice time, and then the real funeral, that all I think made a huge difference in helping to process it, because you feel very unmoored if you don't have those like things stick around you. Whatever person in Judaism came up with the concept of a Shiva is a genius, acknowledging that like this is a different space we're in than normal. So we're going to do things differently here. Another thing we got to do with him that usually you don't get to do with the person. Shivas are not unpleasant. Like I've had fun at Shivas. They usually have great deli. You get to see people. They do. And you get to see people you often don't get to see. Extended family, friends who've lived far away. They're kind of really special spaces. What a gift that we got to be in that space with the Met. He wanted to be there. We met like both like his prehistory, now his like post history, and his like actual history. We're all sort of around this disabled Jewish community, this through line that goes even before and beyond him. You knew, like, you didn't know exactly he would be there, but you always knew that they'd be friends. Cheers, like where everyone, like the bar where everyone knows your name. It was a little bit like that. He would have wanted them to be friends anyway. It's sad it had to happen in that way. There is one funny story that I feel like should be memorialized in this interview. The morning of Emmet's actual funeral, I got everyone breakfast, right? And I went to Acme, and I got, among other things, I got like some like pre-cut fruit, like cantaloupe, honeydew, whatever. So we have the little breakfast. And then like 2 days later, I see a report that someone who was cutting the fruit at that Acme had hepatitis A. And like everyone, if you had consumed fruit from the Acme that you bought between like this period of time, it happened to me when I bought it, you need to like go get like post-exposure like vaccinations. So I had to like text everyone who was there. I'd be like, hey guys, like, just so you know, you might have been exposed to Hep A. Like, it's the less bad Hep, but go deal with that. And apparently it actually was so absurd that it like kind of cheered people up. And everyone was fine. No one got sick. It was just a ridiculous thing to happen, that like this moment where I was like, oh, I'm like caring for everyone. And then it's like, actually, I just like infected you all. So.
But if anyone knows how to handle public health, it's our community.
Exactly. Everyone like hopped to it. And like, you know, and then like the Acme didn't even have the Hep A vaccine, even though they're the one who infected me. So I had to like go to a CVS. So I was like, so everyone dealt with the public health crisis appropriately and everyone was fine. It was just like, really, like, this is what's going to happen now. Like, after we've just had like our whole run in with like horrible disease and death, just like this is on top of that. But it was all fine. Like, there's actually something like very Jewish about that. Like, yeah, it's like very dark humor. Like the food at the Shiva was poisoned. Like,
it sounds like a Jewish joke.
Yeah, because everyone has their own relationship with him and their own stories. He kind of built community wherever he went. Like, of course, he could like out-organize us all on his deathbed. Who he was. He was really my first friend who relied on a wheelchair. And definitely, I remember once we were going home from something and I was going to go take the Broad Street line back from City Hall. And he was like, oh, I like can't get to the Broad Street line because there's like no elevator. I was like, it blew my mind. I was like, wait, what? This like incredibly basic public facility you can't access. I definitely pay more attention now to what spaces are accessible. Not enough of them are. Yeah, I learned a lot from him, just like seeing him navigate the world. I want them to be a part of what we're doing. The power of solidarity. This has been honestly therapeutic for me, just like getting to talk about him, talking about him since. It's not necessarily this concentrated amount of time to talk about him and remember him. He had such like incredible insight for someone so young. Not that I wasn't so sad that he died, but I thought I was very moved on. And then when you actually asked me to do the project, it kind of brought up this fresh wave of it, caught up in it again. And that kind of like it surprised me because I do think grief kind of comes in waves. And I think that this is like a cresting wave of it for me, like kind of having a space to reflect on it. But I'm really glad that you're doing this. I think these are really important stories to tell. And yeah, this has been personally therapeutic for me to just sort of have a time to talk about what he meant. Like early in the interview, I was getting like kind of teary and like I'm not a crier. I very rarely cry, but it was really like welling up in me, like both like how tragic it was, but also just what a gift he was to all of us. And like I'm so grateful that I got to know him. It was just nice to like share memories with him, especially because I don't live in Philadelphia right now. Like there are people I'm still in touch with, but like I don't really see people who knew him. He was sort of giving us the tools, be prepared for what was to come. Was a very unique moment. Hopefully we can sort of take some of the lessons we got from it and use them elsewhere. No, he was a rabbi. If anyone was a rabbi, he's a rabbi. I met with such a teacher, like as an individual. So this is just a way of like magnifying his impact.